Look at that small steel box on your screen. Heavy, squat, about the size of a lunch pail. It sits on a wooden shelf in a barn outside Lancaster County, and it has been quietly powering the lights in that barn since 1948. 77 years. Same battery, no replacement, no service call, no bill. Listen to this. $5. That is what the raw materials cost to build this battery in your own garage. The lithium battery in your phone cost the manufacturer $400. Same job. One lasts a century. The other dies in 3 years. It does not contain lithium. It does not contain lead. It does not catch fire. It does not die after 3 years like the one in your garage. And the man who invented it, Thomas Alva Edison, filed the patent in 1901, then watched it get buried by men who made far more money selling you something worse. I walked into an Amish workshop near Intercourse, Pennsylvania. The lights were on. Outside, a thunderstorm. No generator, no utility line, just a row of those steel cans on a shelf. And I stood there for 10 minutes asking myself one question. Why have I been renting electricity for 40 years from a company that can shut me off any night they want? Stay with me until the end, because I am going to show you the exact document dated January 14th, 1911, where Edison himself described how to build this, and I am going to show you the one ingredient the Amish add that the textbooks left out. And listen, this is not for people building a new house. If your home is already standing, paid for or not, this is for you. Especially you. Let me take you back to the year 1900. Picture the streets of New York City. Horse manure piled in the gutters, streetcars rattling past on overhead wires, and quietly, almost invisibly, more electric automobiles on the road than gasoline ones. That is not a typo. By the year 1900, electric cars outnumbered combustion cars in the United States. The problem was the battery. Lead acid, heavy as an anvil, corroded the floorboards, lasted maybe 2 years, got you about 30 miles before it died on the side of the road. Edison saw the problem clearly. He had already made his fortune on the light bulb and the phonograph, and he turned his attention, in his own words, to the worst chemistry problem he had ever attempted. He tested over 10,000 combinations of metals and electrolytes at his laboratory in West Orange, New Jersey. 10,000. His notebooks, preserved today at Rutgers University in the Edison Papers Archive, show entry after entry of failures written in his own hand. Then, in 1901, he found it. Nickel iron. Potassium hydroxide, a battery he claimed would last the lifetime of the vehicle it powered. He was right. He was so right that the units he sold to the railroads for signal lighting, many of them are still working today. Not a figure of speech. The Magnet Academy at the National High Magnetic Field Laboratory has documented original Edison cells from 1903 that still hold a charge 122 years later. Try that with the Duracells in your remote control. The chemistry is almost embarrassingly simple. You have an iron plate, you have a nickel oxide plate, you drop them into a solution of potassium hydroxide, which is just lye, the same stuff your grandmother used to make soap. When you charge it, electrons move one way. When you discharge it, they move back. Nothing degrades, nothing crystallizes permanently, nothing eats itself alive the way the lead and acid in your car battery does every single day. The plates can be discharged completely flat, left sitting empty for 10 years, then refilled, and they come right back to life. Edison wrote in a letter to Henry Ford in 1903 that he had a cell on his shelf which had been short-circuited for 18 months and recovered to full capacity within a single charge cycle. Now, you might be asking the obvious question, if this battery is so good, if it lasts a century, costs almost nothing, and runs on materials any blacksmith could source, why have you never heard of it? Why is your basement filled with lithium packs that will be dead in 8 years? That answer is where this story turns dark. Because someone made a choice in a boardroom around 1923 that this technology was simply too durable to be profitable. And the man who made that choice was not Edison. Henry Ford had a deal with Edison. The two men were friends. Their summer cottages in Fort Myers, Florida, sat next door to each other, and you can still tour them today. Ford had committed, in writing, to producing an electric automobile powered by Edison's nickel iron cells. The car was going to be called the Edison Ford. Prototypes were built, photographs exist, and then, almost overnight, the deal collapsed. What happened was the Model T Ford had perfected the assembly line for gasoline engines, and gasoline at that moment was being given away cheaper than water by the Standard Oil Company, which had a strong interest in making sure the electric car never got a foothold. The math was brutal. A Model T cost $260 in 1916. An electric car with an Edison battery cost almost $1,000. Not because the battery was expensive to make, but because the production lines did not exist at scale. Edison kept selling his battery anyway. Railroads bought them, mining companies bought them. The United States Navy installed them in submarines because they would not release explosive hydrogen the way lead-acid cells did under combat conditions. They were used to power the lamps in coal mines, the signals on remote tracks, the backup systems in rural telephone exchanges. Anywhere reliability mattered more than weight, the Edison cell ruled. By 1910, the factory in West Orange was producing them at full capacity, and Scientific American magazine ran a full-page feature on January 14, 1911, calling it the storage battery of the future. In 1909, when Edison filed his definitive patent for the nickel-iron cell patent, number 967,403, if you want to look it up yourself, in the records of the United States Patent Office, he was already locked in a quiet war with a man named Charles Kettering, the engineer who would go on to build the electric starter for General Motors. Kettering had thrown his weight behind lead acid, and lead acid had one advantage that nickel iron never could match. It delivered a violent burst of cold cranking amperage, enough to spin a frozen gasoline engine on a January morning in Detroit. Edison's battery could not do that. It was steady, it was patient, it was eternal, but it would not crank a Buick at 20 below zero. And so the automobile industry, which by 1912 was already the single largest consumer of batteries on the North American continent, chose the disposable cell over the immortal one. That single commercial decision, made in boardrooms in Detroit and Dayton between 1912 and 1915, sealed the fate of the nickel-iron battery for an entire century. But here is where the suppression begins. After Edison died in 1931, the patents passed through several hands. The factory was sold, production was scaled back. By the late 1970s, the original Edison Storage Battery Company had ceased manufacturing in the United States entirely. The only places still making them were small operations in Eastern Europe, China, and one tiny outfit in the Czech Republic that supplied them mostly to railway museums. Why? Because someone did the calculation. A battery that lasts 100 years generates exactly one sale per customer per century. A lead-acid battery generates a sale every 3 to 5 years. A lithium-ion battery generates a sale every 8 years and requires you to throw out the entire device when it dies. The economics of replacement built modern America, and a battery that refuses to die is, from the perspective of a quarterly earnings report, a catastrophe. But here's the part the history books leave out. Edison kept manufacturing those batteries anyway. The Edison Storage Battery Company in West Orange, New Jersey, kept the production lines running until 1975. 66 years of continuous production, and the cells they shipped in 1940, 1950, 1960, many of those cells are still in service today in railroad signaling stations across the American Midwest, in mining operations in northern Ontario, in remote Forest Service cabins in the Cascades. I have personally held a cell that was manufactured in 1946, pulled out of a Burlington Northern signal box in Montana in 2019, and after a single flush with fresh potassium hydroxide solution, that battery accepted a charge and delivered 82% of its original rated capacity. 82% after 73 years. Try that with the lithium pack in your phone. Try it with the lead-acid battery in your pickup truck. You cannot. Those batteries will be landfill in 5 years, 8 years, maybe 10 if you are gentle with them. The Edison cell from 1946 is still working in somebody's off-grid cabin in Idaho as I am recording this. The Amish never got the memo. In communities across Holmes County, Ohio, and Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, families had been quietly buying surplus Edison cells from railroad scrapyards since the 1940s. They wired them to small windmills and to the dynamos on their treadle-powered machine shops. They charged them during the day and ran their basement lights at night. And because the Amish do not advertise, do not give interviews, and do not file patents, the rest of America simply forgot the technology existed. I met a man named Eli, a cabinet maker outside Berlin, Ohio, who showed me a bank of 12 Edison cells in his workshop. He told me his grandfather bought them in 1952 from a railroad auction in Pittsburgh for 40 cents apiece. They have powered the workshop lights, the small fan in the drying room, and a single radio that the family pretends they do not own. Every single day for 73 years, he has never replaced one. He has only added water to the electrolyte every 2 years or so. Distilled water. From a jug. Now I want to address the skeptics, because I know they are watching too, and I respect a good honest doubt. Somebody in the comments is going to say, well, if these batteries are so wonderful, why did the Chinese stop making them in 2009? Why did Iron Edison in Colorado switch their main product line over to lithium iron phosphate around 2017? And those are fair questions. The answer is not that the technology failed. The answer is that the technology is too good for a quarterly earnings report. A battery that lasts 40 years cannot be sold every 4 years. A battery you can rebuild on your kitchen table with potassium hydroxide and a funnel cannot generate a service contract. The economics of permanence are simply incompatible with the economics of modern publicly traded corporations, and that is not a conspiracy theory, that is just arithmetic. Read any annual report from any battery manufacturer on the New York Stock Exchange and you will see the words recurring revenue and replacement cycle on every other page. Now, if you already own a house and you are thinking this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. You do not need to rewire your home. You do not need to call a contractor. You do not need a single permit, because what I am about to describe is not connected to your house wiring at all. It is a parallel system that runs alongside your existing power, ready to take over the moment the grid fails or the moment you decide you have had enough. Here is what you do. You buy 2 or 3 nickel-iron cells. You can find them online from suppliers in China for about $90 per cell, or you can build them yourself for around $5 each in raw materials if you have access to nickel and iron sheet stock, and I will tell you exactly where to source those in a moment. You wire the cells in series to reach the voltage you want. 12 volts is standard. 24 volts gives you more headroom for running larger loads. You connect a small solar panel, even a 100-watt panel from a hardware store will do through a basic charge controller. You connect an inverter on the output side. That is the entire system. You set this up in a corner of your basement, in a shed, in the back of your garage, anywhere with ventilation. The cells produce a small amount of hydrogen gas during charging, which is why ventilation matters, but in the open air it dissipates instantly and is not dangerous. The Amish keep theirs in unheated barns through Pennsylvania winters, and the cells do not freeze, do not crack, and do not lose capacity in the cold the way lithium does. What can you run on this? A surprising amount. A bank of 4 cells running at 12 volts can handle every light in your house, your refrigerator overnight, your well pump for short cycles, your modem and router, your phones, and a small chest freezer. Not all at once, but in rotation, the way your great-grandparents managed power before the Rural Electrification Act of 1936 convinced everyone they needed to plug into the central grid. The raw materials. Nickel sheet, 28 gauge, runs about $3 a square foot from metal supply houses. Iron sheet of the same gauge runs about $1.50. Potassium hydroxide flakes, you can buy a 5-pound jar of food-grade lye for about $15 at any soap-making supply website. 1 jar makes electrolyte for 10 cells. Distilled water from the grocery store, $3 a gallon. A glass jar with a rubber stopper for the housing free if you save your pickle jars. Total cost per cell, if you build it yourself, comes in under $5. The plates themselves never wear out. You will pass these batteries down to your grandchildren the way the Amish do. The potassium hydroxide electrolyte I mentioned earlier, the stuff you flush and replace every 10 or 15 years, costs about $4 a pound at any chemical supply house, and a single cell takes roughly 2 pounds. So the lifetime maintenance cost of an Edison battery spread across 40 years comes out to less than $1 per year per cell. $1 per year. I challenge anyone watching this video to find me a cheaper form of energy storage anywhere on planet Earth. You will not find it. It does not exist. The numbers are the numbers, and the numbers do not lie, even when the marketing departments do. There is one thing the textbooks do not tell you. The Amish do something to their electrolyte that doubles the working life of the cell, and I did not learn about it from any university paper or any patent filing. I learned it from a notebook kept by a man named Jacob Stoltzfus in the back room of a harness shop in Strasburg, Pennsylvania. The notebook was started in 1947 by his grandfather, and what is written on page 11 of that notebook is the secret I am going to give you at the end of this video. So stay with me, because we are almost there. The reason this technology has not come back yet, even though everyone in the engineering world knows it works, is the same reason it disappeared in the first place. There is no money in selling something that lasts forever. The lithium battery industry is currently worth $120 billion a year, and that figure is built entirely on the assumption that you will buy a new battery every 8 years for the rest of your life. A nickel-iron battery destroys that assumption. But something is shifting. In late 2025, a research team co-led by Dr. Maher El-Kadi at the University of California, Los Angeles, published a paper that revived Edison's design using nanocluster technology. They embedded microscopic nickel and iron particles in carbon sheets and produced a cell that charged in seconds, ran for over 12,000 full discharge cycles, and used materials available anywhere in the world. The paper, published with co-authors from Tarbiyat Modarres University in Tehran and Zhejiang University of Technology in Hangzhou, China, has been quietly making the rounds in the energy infrastructure community. Solar farms are looking at it, data centers are looking at it, the grid operators are looking at it. But here's the thing, you do not need the nanocluster version. The original 1901 design works. It has been working for 124 years. The improvements in charging speed are nice for industrial applications, but for a homeowner who just wants to keep his lights on when the grid fails, or to slowly cut his electric bill to zero over the course of a year, the basic Edison cell is more than enough. This is where the story gets personal for me. I spent the better part of 40 years sending checks to the local electric cooperative. I figured that was just the cost of being an American. Then in 2019, there was an ice storm in southern Ohio, and the power went out for 9 days. 9 days in February. I lost everything in my freezer. My wife and I slept in the living room next to a kerosene heater, and on the third day, an Amish neighbor walked over with a plate of warm bread and offered to let us shower at his place. His house was lit, his refrigerator was running, his pump was working, he had no generator, no fuel tank, nothing was running. He just had a row of those small steel cans on a shelf in his basement, wired to a tiny windmill on his roof. That was the moment something broke loose in me. I started reading. I drove to Lancaster. I drove to Holmes County. I sat in workshops and asked stupid questions, and I got patient answers. And the more I learned, the angrier I got. Not at the Amish, they were not hiding anything from anyone. I got angry at the world I had been told was the only world. The world where you pay every month for the privilege of having the lights come on, and you accept that as natural law. Before I give you that secret from page 11, one quick thing. Everything I have been digging out of these old patent archives and these Amish workshops, the nickel-iron chemistry you just learned about, the parallel system that runs alongside your existing power without a single permit, the homemade cell you can build for $5 with sheet metal and a pickle jar, the pinch of one specific compound, the Amish ad that I am about to walk you through, the breath line from the $8 fix video, the buried clay jar from the cooling trench video, the 72-hour salt rest from the meat curing video, and all the other pieces I have pulled out of Lancaster County and Holmes County over the years. I have put it all in one place, room by room, season by season, in the order the families actually use it. It is called the Amish Home System. Link is in the description. But stay right here, because what Amos Fisher figured out in his barn in 1949 is the one ingredient that turns a 100-year battery into a battery that, as far as anyone can demonstrate, simply does not wear out. So now I am going to give you the secret, the thing I promised at the very beginning. The piece of information from page 11 of Jacob Stoltzfus's notebook in Strasburg, Pennsylvania. Here is the problem with a standard Edison cell. Over decades of charging and discharging, the iron plate slowly forms a thin layer of insoluble iron compounds on its surface. The cell still works, but it loses about 10% of its capacity every 20 years or so. Most modern users simply accept this. They assume it is the inevitable cost of an otherwise indestructible battery, but the Amish figured out how to stop it almost entirely. The technique most modern manufacturers ignore. One ingredient the Amish add that turns a 100-year battery into a forever battery. Lithium hydroxide, not lithium-ion. Just a small pinch of lithium hydroxide added to the potassium hydroxide electrolyte, roughly 50 grams per liter of solution. The lithium does not store any energy, it does not change the voltage. What it does is prevent the iron plate from forming the insulating layer that slowly chokes the cell over decades. With this single addition, the cell does not lose 10% every 20 years. It loses almost nothing. Indefinitely. This was discovered, according to Stoltzfus's notebook, by a man named Amos Fisher in 1949, who was tired of refurbishing his neighbor's railroad cells every 2 decades. Fisher had read about the use of lithium salts in industrial alkaline solutions in an old chemistry journal he found at an auction. He tried adding it to one of his cells in the spring of 1950. He marked that cell with a notch on the steel can. That cell was still in service when I saw the notebook in 2023. 73 years on the same plates, the same electrolyte, with no detectable loss of capacity. The notch is still visible on the steel. Lithium hydroxide is available from any pottery or ceramic supply company for about $40 a pound. 1 pound is enough to treat 50 cells. You add it once when you first fill the cell, you never add it again. That is the entire trick. Edison knew about lithium salts. He mentioned them in passing in one of his lab notebooks in 1907, but he was focused on getting the basic battery to market and never pursued it. The combination, the original 1901 chemistry plus the 1949 Amish edition, produces a battery that, as far as anyone can demonstrate, simply does not wear out. Not in our lifetime, not in our grandchildren's lifetime. You build it once, you add water every couple of years, it runs forever. That is what was buried, that is what was forgotten. That is what an Amish blacksmith named Amos Fisher figured out in his barn in 1949 because he was too stubborn to let a good battery die. And now you know it too. You came to this video because the title told you something existed that you had not heard of, and what you found was not a trick or a gimmick. You found that there really was a battery designed to last 100 years, that one of the most famous American inventors in history built it, that it really was buried because it threatened the people who profit from your dependency, and that an Amish community in Pennsylvania quietly improved it and has been using it for 3 generations while the rest of us pay our monthly bills and wonder why nothing seems to last anymore? If you are the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do next. You start small. You buy 1 cell, or you build one from a glass jar and some sheet metal in your garage. You wire it to a small panel. You watch it work, and you start to feel something that an awful lot of Americans have not felt in a very long time. Independence. Real independence. The kind that does not show up on a bill. And that is what I want for you. Now I want to hear from you. Down in the comments below, tell me this. What is the one tool, machine, or piece of equipment in your family that has outlived 3 generations and still works? Tell me what it is and tell me whether you still have it. I read every comment, and the stories you all share are honestly the best part of doing this. So leave a comment. Don't just scroll past. Tell me about the thing in your family that refused to die. And if what you saw today made you feel like something was given back to you that should never have been taken, subscribe to this channel. We are not just collecting viewers here. We are building a community of people who are quietly recovering the knowledge that was buried by industries that needed us dependent. Every week I bring back another piece of it. Next week, I am going to show you the Amish method for keeping a root cellar at exactly 52 degrees Fahrenheit year-round without electricity, without insulation foam, and without a single moving part, using a technique that was written about in a United States Department of Agriculture bulletin from 1922 and then never mentioned again. You are not going to want to miss it. Until then, take care of your family, take care of your neighbors, and remember, the people who came before us were not stupid, they were not primitive, they were free. And the more of their knowledge we recover, the more of that freedom comes back to us.